What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of Be Shafe Daily. Brendan Schaefer here with you. It is Thursday, March 7th, 2024. Talking some St. Louis Cardinals here on the channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen so you can stay up to date on all of our Cardinals content throughout the season. You can also follow or subscribe to Be Shafe Daily, the podcast, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Today, we're going to talk about Tommy Edman, Cardinals center fielder, supposed to be the Cardinals center fielder this season, but we don't really know what his timeline is on getting back healthy, back to the field, so that he can fulfill those duties as the Cardinals have planned. Now, a little bit more information has come out on the situation for Tommy Edman in recent days, so we're going to talk a little bit about that on today's episode of the show. Tommy Edman had the wrist surgery in October. We know he was dealing with the wrist stuff last season, and then lo and behold, we found out during the winter that he did go ahead and have surgery. Cardinals initially said, hey, we think he's going to be ready to go for opening day. Probably going to be a little bit limited in certain areas when they get to spring training in Jupiter, and that was the case. For a while, we heard about Tommy Edman, not really being up to full speed on throwing. He's not facing live pitching yet, but it seemed like for the early days of spring training that he was making steps in at least the right direction. I was down there in Jupiter for a few weeks, and while I was down there, we saw Tommy Edman throwing from the shortstop position before they got Brandon Crawford, throwing from the center field position during various fielding drills. I wouldn't say he was ever throwing at 100%. I wouldn't say he was ever truly letting it eat with the throwing arm, but he was doing the drills and participating relatively normally from a defensive standpoint. Hitting-wise, he never did face live pitching, and I'm not 100% certain that he ever faced even coach pitch, just like regular batting practice. I can't recall if he did before they ended up shutting him down or not. I do know that from the right side of the plate, he's a switch hitter, so from the right side, he was lagging a little bit behind in terms of what he was doing from the left side in terms of at the plate, being able to do different drills, hitting off a tee, and progressing toward ultimately live BP and then a game. That would have been the hope, but he was lagging a little bit behind from the right side. And then the Cardinals, it turns out, shut him down entirely for a brief period of time because he was dealing with some discomfort and some pain in the wrist. I'm going to put up this tweet here from John Denton, covers the Cardinals for MLB.com. Here's what he tweeted earlier on Thursday from Cardinal manager Ollie Marmol. Said that Tommy Edman, with the right wrist surgery, will continue to play catch today and take T-swings from the left side of the plate, which I guess would mean he's not hitting from the right side of the plate just yet. John Denton adding that Edman was recently shut down after experiencing pain and stiffness in the wrist, and hitting right-handed still troublesome for Tommy Edman, which is kind of interesting because right-handed is really the side of the plate that he is most effective at the plate. He's really been good against left-handed pitching throughout his career. Of course, he's batting right-handed during those at-bats, and left-handed has lagged a little bit behind throughout his career in terms of his effectiveness, his OPS, etc., from the left side of the plate against right-handed pitching. But right now, he's a little more comfortable with what he's able to do with that wrist being an issue for him batting left-handed. It's not as bad, but from the right side, it's an issue. What's the timeline for Tommy Edman? Because it doesn't really seem that right now it's very plausible for him to make the opening day roster in terms of a health perspective. It does feel like a stint on the injured list could be what we see for Tommy Edman to begin the season, especially if right now we're still hearing about it being troublesome for him to hit right-handed. And he had progressed. He had progressed to a point where they thought, yes, he was a little behind on the right-handed nature of his swing, but they thought pretty soon he was going to be able to catch up there. But the way that it was framed yesterday on Wednesday from the Cardinals, when it was kind of revealed that Edman had this bit of a shutdown before yesterday being the first day that he resumed playing catch and resumed tee work activities, and now we're seeing, okay, maybe just the left side, he's doing some tee work and is still having some trouble from the right side. The plan at the time had been for Tommy Edman to go ahead and progress on both sides of the plate, get that right-handed side up to where he was from a left-handed side as of like a week to 10 days ago, and then move on from there. But Ollie Marmol described it this way, and he made this little motion. If you're watching the video version of it, you can see he said they wanted to continue to be having upward progressing forward on a day-to-day basis. Yes, they understood that it wasn't always going to be linear every single time, It's not that he's going to have a great day and then an even better day and then an even better day and then an even better day and then he's back in the lineup. That they knew it wouldn't necessarily be that way coming off of the surgery, at least in the way that Ollie described it a week or 10 days ago. Maybe at the time that was just their own way of describing it to try and not make it sound as bad as it is. But at the time they said it would be okay to have, a day where it doesn't feel as good. But then as long as the next day he starts to be back on that upward trajectory, the Cardinals felt okay about the way it was going as of a week 10 days ago. Clearly, it didn't stay on that trajectory where he was having maybe more days of pain, discomfort than days that he was making good progress and feeling good, recovering well. And so that's why they put the pause in the regimen for him for a period of time. And I don't know how many days the pause was. I'd have to go back in the memory bank to remember, okay, like what's the last day I really saw Tommy Edman doing work on the backfields? Was it about a week? Was it about 5 days? I'm not 100% sure. I'm not down in Jupiter anymore, so maybe that's something that's been reported elsewhere. But it was a pause to where it forces Tommy Edman to basically go back to ground zero in terms of the baseball activity and the work that he's able to do. So whatever he had built up in the early days of February is kind of lapsed at this point, and you have to start all over and say, can he progress and check the boxes through, whether it's hitting off a tee and now it's doing some front toss drills where the coach is sitting out there and tossing you the ball and you're swinging with a little more oomph because the ball's not just sitting there on a tee for you. And then can you do coach pitch BP? And can you do those things from both sides of the plate? And then can you do it in a live game and feel good about it? Or live BP, a pitcher on the backfield's trying to get you out, but it's not actually a Grapefruit League game. And then can you get into game set? So now he's basically got to start that clock over. And we're sitting here on March 7th. It's about 3 weeks from the beginning of the regular season. I think there's still room. If Tommy Edman starts progressing and having good day after good day, I do think there's still room for him to be ready for March 28th in Los Angeles. But again, I'll put the tweet back up from John Denton. This is from Thursday, Thursday morning, whenever it was, out there in Cardinals camp, that hitting righty is still troublesome. That's a tweet that John Denton puts out based on the conversation that the media had with Ollie Marmol this morning, right? So if it's still troublesome for hitting righty, how can you find a timeline basically on when it's not going to still be troublesome, right? Like this is not a situation where Tommy Edman had wrist issues last year, and then he goes through the offseason and maybe a rehab program to try to make it feel better, but you avoid, a surgical intervention. No, they did have the surgery in October. And you know that there's going to be a process to try to get back from that. But the fact that there's still enough pain and discomfort this far on that it's not like, did the surgery resolve the issue, or does it, was it not the solution to what he was dealing with, or maybe it is going to be fine in time, but just not yet? Like, what is the situation there? Is it more concerning because he did have the surgery rather than spending all off season going through the rehab and then coming into camp and having issues, and then you go, oh man, he probably should have had the surgery? It's hard to kind of grade what we think of this one because he did have the surgery that at the time they recommended he get to try and put this issue behind him. So it is a little bit concerning, I think, at this point that he's still dealing with this level of discomfort. And again, I'm no surgical expert. I don't know with the arthroscopic surgery, right? Whatever it was that he had, I don't know what the timeline's supposed to be. But it feels like there is, we're in the range of, you'd call this a bit of a setback because what they had said was should be ready to go by opening day. And right now that's certainly in question. And with the way that the timeline goes, 3 weeks till opening day as of now, if it's not within the next couple of days, there's no pain. He's able to be good. And then you can start ramping up from there, then that's fine. But if it's a recurring issue and it's not, like I'm telling you, it's time to be nervous about Tommy Edman. That's kind of my takeaway from this. And I could be wrong. I could be chicken littling this entire thing, but it does feel a little bit strange that he would still be dealing with the wrist thing. And it's like you had the surgery to fix the injury, to fix the issue that was going on. The recovery from that you want to be careful with. I can certainly understand that. But at a certain point in time, it's like, did the surgery fix it, or are we talking about kind of a prolonged injury that's still going to be something he deals with? It's kind of hard to get a read for it. It really is. I don't know that this means that it's truly panic time, but it is time to be nervous, I think, about what this could look like, because I don't think the company line of Tommy Edman's going to be ready to go for the start of the season is one that they would give you today. I think they would say, it's in question. We're just going to have to take it day by day. But it certainly seems with the way that things have gone in recent days to have to go from, yeah, he's ramping up to now we're seeing him shut down for a period of time after a pause in the rehab plan. It really does feel like one of those situations that Tommy Edman may not be ready, and it's lingering. The whole thing is lingering, and that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. What do you think, Cardinals fans, about what we're talking about here? We're just trying to talk through this Tommy Edman situation because the whole way through, like the first time we really got a chance to talk with him at winter warm-up, it was like, yeah, everything should be fine, good to go. But like until you ramp up those baseball activities, and it may only be a 5 to 7 day period where day zero happens, and then 7 days later, if every day is better than the last one, you're able to continue progressing, and that can probably come together very quickly. It hasn't come together quickly for Tommy Edman so far this spring, to the extent that the Cardinals paused his progress in terms of what he was doing baseball wise for a period of a number of days, and now you're kind of starting back up again. And still, we're hearing from the tweet that John Denton sent that right-handed hitting is still kind of troublesome for Tommy Edman. So is it a week that you take off and that's enough to heal it? What is it? Because it's, again, the surgery happened in October. So I'm not. I know that a lot of Cardinals fans will hear this and they want to play like, oh, the Cardinals always lie about injuries. This is just par for the course for them. I really don't think that's the case with this, because they're just operating with the information that they have at any given moment. And their hope was that Tommy Edman could then have the surgery, recover, and then progress toward getting back into game action by this timeline. When the player then has a setback, it doesn't mean the Cardinals originally lied. It just means that there's been a setback. But I think to not be willing to use those terms would be a mistake. There was a setback. If you had to pause the program in spring training, that's not what you're looking for. And so it's something to keep an eye on at a minimum. And at a maximum, it's like, how long does this go before we go, did the surgery fix whatever issue he was dealing with? Is this something that can linger weeks and months into the season? Or is this just a matter of they ramped it too much too quick, and so they wanted to have a little bit of time off? I don't know. At this point, I said this on the radio yesterday on KTGR when we're talking about the comparison of Tommy Edman or Sonny Gray, who plays first. I took Tommy Edman yesterday, but it was because I think an overriding sense of optimism that, like, look, the Cardinals have banked a lot on having Tommy Edman. I meant to say, if I said it wrong, I said Edman would be playing first, but I also said, I think there's room for Edman to be out till June, where I don't think that's going to be the case with Sonny Gray almost no matter what, unless he has a major setback. Like, he's dealt with this issue with his hamstring before. It's something that he had back in 2022, speaking of Sonny Gray, and so I think he knows how to handle it. The problem for him to make opening day is that he's not built up. On the arm side of things, on the pitching side of things, he's not built up to where he's been throwing 5-6 innings, and then you could take him right back into that mode once he comes back in a few weeks. He's going to still have to do the build-up, which is going to cost him more time, and that's why I think his could certainly bleed into the regular season. Tommy Edman feels like maybe tomorrow he wakes up and does some activity, and then does a little more, and then does a little more, and then 7 days later, it's like, oh, he's actually good to go. It was just we needed the pause to reset, and now everything feels good, and he's strong, and we're ready. But the other side of that could be you continue to have setbacks, you continue to kind of relapse on whatever this pain is, and the surgery didn't fix it. Now we're talking about could be something long-term, where I'm not even going to go into what it could be. It could just be months, right? Like, there's a world in which it doesn't end up fixing the surgery that he had, doesn't end up answering the reason that he's dealing with this discomfort. Now, again, this could be more reactionary. I haven't had a chance to go within the last couple of days while it's going on, while we have learned about the setback, to be down there and hear exactly what the language is and the tone being used with these questions about where Tommy Edman is. Maybe it is just as simple as, yeah, we put a pause on it. We're going to take it slow, but within a few weeks, we think he's going to be ready. But if you're having to pause, like, I just keep coming back to the idea of what was going so wrong that you had to pause. Well, pain, discomfort, stiffness, whatever the case would be. Is that something that is a result of, a normal result of this recovery? Or is it like, we thought the surgery was going to fix his issue, and then maybe it doesn't? That would be the worst case scenario, obviously. And we've only heard positivity to this point, but I think it's definitely time to go. I don't know. Opening day is seeming like a real stretch. And then if he doesn't make opening day, he doesn't make opening day. But if he's not ready by mid-April, if we're talking May 1st and they still can't figure out why this is happening, that would be the concern. He is ramping back up, so that's the good news. Um, they paused him and then he started again. It's not like he's still in the pause or he's going to see a specialist. That's not the language we're hearing right now, so that is a positive. But on the other side of it, this is the round of activity to watch, because if you ramp it back up and need to be paused again, I wouldn't be surprised at that point to see the Cardinals, take a deeper look at maybe what's going on. Again, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on that, but I'm just kind of walking through verbally the possibilities that it seems like it could be at this point. Ideally, the pause they put in was good, and they were just ramping too much too quick, and his body just wasn't responding, and now they can take it more slowly. He does miss March 28th, but by early April, he's good to go, and this is something that could be in the rearview mirror for him as he takes over as the Cardinals' primary center fielder. To me, that's like the ideal version of the way this goes, and there's still a percentage chance that it ends up that way. Let's talk about what happens, though, if it doesn't. Is it the end of the world not to have Tommy Edman in center field? Because I was a guy that last year, if you watched B-Shape Daily or you watched my YouTube channel, #Everyday Dylan. I wanted to see Dylan Carlson be given an opportunity by the Cardinals like they extended to Tyler O'Neill, like they've extended to guys like Harrison Bader in the past. Dylan Carlson was once a top prospect. He has demonstrated, to my eyes, the ability to play a really good defensive center field. So I wanted to see when Dylan Carlson would have a spark, it was like, go ahead and feed that flame and let it turn into a bonfire. Let Dylan Carlson do his thing. Let Dylan cook, right? That was kind of the mentality, and see what he could maybe do with it. Give him a boost of confidence, for goodness sake. That's just kind of where the Cardinals it didn't happen last year. Now, in fairness, there's another side to this coin with Dylan Carlson. There's the side of the coin of, well, how many opportunities does he need before he starts producing? Is over 1,400 MLB plate appearances, several hundred from the right side specifically, or I should say left-handed batting against right-handed pitching, which is predominantly what you see. Teams have more righties than lefties usually in their rotations, in their bullpens, etc. And so from that perspective, it's like, has there been a substantial enough sample size that we shouldn't still be talking about give Dylan Carlson a chance? I think you could make an argument on either end of the spectrum. I would say that the opportunity that he's gotten to this point as a big leaguer has been at age 20, 21, 22, 23. Like, he's still a very young player compared to a guy that comes up at age 23, has, 1,000 minor league at-bats like most prospects do before coming in at 22, 23 for their first crack at the big leagues. And then 4 years later, he's 27, and you're talking about, okay, hasn't this guy had his chance? Dylan he didn't have that level of minor league action. He came up at 2021, whatever it was relatively young still when he had those first big league opportunities. And so you could still make the case that at 24, he's growing as a player and still learning. I think that's a fair thing to say. But at the end of the day, it does boil down to, like, what could he do if he comes in for Tommy Edman? And will he come in for Tommy Edman? Like, that's another thing to ask. Will the Cardinals give him the opportunity, keep Lars Nootbaar in left field, obviously Jordan Walker in right, and let Dylan Carlson be the center fielder pretty much on a daily basis to begin the year if Tommy Edman's not available? If that's the case, I think he can do well. And there's a case to be made that he could do better than Tommy Edman could do if he's able to get a little bit more going offensively against right-handed pitching. But I guess you could say the same thing about Tommy Edman, because if you look at the numbers, Tommy Edman, Dylan Carlson, very similar offensive players with the way that they profile. They're both switch hitters, but they both do better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. And if you look at the career numbers, it's not all too dissimilar. Tommy Edman has a career OPS plus of 100, which is league average. He's been a league average hitter in his career. I think a lifetime OPS of 726. It's fine. Dylan Carlson, 99 is his OPS plus. It's almost virtually identical. 717, I believe, is the OPS for Dylan across his career. Now, better numbers early on. He had the one really mostly full season where he was really strong, and then the last 2 years have sort of brought that total down, whereas Tommy's been a little bit more consistent, had a great first year, and then has just kind of leveled out to what he is basically over the last few years. But they haven't really been that dissimilar in terms of their plate profile. Defensively, I think Carlson has good instincts. I think he has less overall upside than Tommy, simply because of the fact that he's not as quick. I think Edman has better range, but I think Dylan's instincts and his jumps on the ball when he's playing confidently are pretty good. Now, you can make the case that he sometimes just makes plays that you go, what is his head in the game? Why did he miss that ball? One that you would come up with from this spring was the game at Clover Park, which is in Port St. Lucie against the Mets. It was a sun field. Wind there is completely brutal in Port St. Lucie. I can tell you that from experience. And so Dylan Carlson's up in center field, and the ball just drops 8 feet away from him. Didn't see it, whatever. And so that's one where people would go, see, you're going to tell me Dylan Carlson's a great center fielder. And I'm going to say that was kind of an isolated thing. But in fairness, there were some misjudged balls a few times last year where you kind of wonder what's his upside and what's his floor, I guess, defensively as a center fielder. Whereas in the case of Tommy Edman, I think he was a very, very good athletic center fielder in terms of getting to balls and getting good jumps, having pretty good instincts, despite the fact that he hasn't really played outfield before very much. And so that's a positive. I think Dylan's certainly a better throwing arm than Tommy Edman, but I'm also not too concerned about Edman's arm if he's able to gobble up those balls in the gap and help his pitching staff steal some extra outs where otherwise that wouldn't be the case. I think that's an important element of what the Cardinals are trying to put together for their team this season. But the way the pitching staff is built, it's not overly pitch to whiff. It's kind of still like pitch to contact for guys like Gibson and Miles Michaelis. And you really don't have a ton of guys that just are going to be in that, 10 and a half strikeouts per nine. The ceiling for some of these guys like Lynn and probably Sonny Gray is right around 1 strikeout per inning. And for Steven Matz, I think you'd put him in that conversation as well. So generally, why I think it's important for the Cardinals to make sure they have center field stabilized is because that's a good portion of what went wrong with the team last year is the defense just wasn't stabilized. And I think it got into the head of the pitching staff where they don't know who they can trust to track down balls, and whether it's in the gap in the outfield or to make the routine play or to turn the double play on the infield, whatever the case was. I feel like that was just like a general malaise over this Cardinals team last year where the defense wasn't as crisp as it could have been. And that's a big way to get the most out of your pitching staff this season. And their game plan to do that has been Tommy Edman in center all offseason. And they cemented that. They planted the flag on that by getting Brandon Crawford to be the backup shortstop so that when Edman's healthy, whenever that might be, he is going to be the outfielder, the center fielder for this team and doesn't have to go back to the infield. Dylan Carlson, I think we got to recognize, can be a very similar player to Tommy Edman, but he's got to have that confidence. And it's kind of a hard place to get confidence from when you're kind of told, I'm the fourth outfielder. What does that mean? Well, there's going to be opportunities for you, but you don't see it on paper. Dylan's got to find a way to just kind of get through that and recognize that there is going to be an opportunity for him here. And if he can take charge with that and really make it happen, I think the Cardinals can be okay in whatever time the Tommy Edman is out. But I also think it's going to be interesting to see, will they be tempted to move Nootbaar back to center field where they have acknowledged he's not as quality? They think he could be a really great left fielder, but he's better in left than he is in center field. Would they do that though to get somebody else's bat in the lineup in left, like Brendan Donovan, like if Burleson's on the roster and they want to play him against righties? Would they do that rather than have Dylan in center and Nootbaar in left? That's something that I think could conceivably happen. It's something to watch for toward the end of spring training. If and when it becomes clear that Edman's not going to be ready for the opening day roster, do they start giving Nootbaar some looks in center? And that could be a bad thing for Dylan Carlson if they do. If they keep Nootbaar in left and Dylan continues to get opportunities in center, he's going to have to take them and run with them, and the Cardinals can be okay as a result of that. But I also think you look at it and think the rest of the lineup has got to be hitting around Dylan Carlson as well. Otherwise, he's going to be the first person that people point to and say, if he's not hitting, we're going to need to find this offensive boost from somewhere, which could maybe be sliding Nootbaar to center, sacrificing defense a little bit, and making the left fielder be somebody that you think can provide more thump against right-handed pitching than Dylan can. That, to me, is kind of the way this slides in and the decision the Cardinals will have to make. But Carlson, again, was once a top prospect, so if he can just find this to be the season where he lines it in, gains confidence, and runs with it, the Cardinals could be in really good shape. But they may have to reckon with this if Tommy Edman is not ready, and if the ramp-up for him over the next few days doesn't go well. I don't think he's going to be ready by March 28th. And yes, there is a conversation to be had about Lars Nootbaar going through a bit of an injury right now with rib soreness, because on Saturday, I think it was, he tried to make a catch that his elbow jammed into his ribs or something. It's the most Lars Nootbaar injury of all time. He always finds a weird way to get hurt, it seems. But the precautionary, they're leaving him out of the lineup for the time being. Hopefully that's not anything that lingers, because then you're really up a creek without a paddle. But we're going to assume for right now that Nootbaar's okay. But we're keeping an eye on that status of Tommy Edman. Let me know what you think in the comments below, Cardinals fans. Are you concerned about Edman's status? Is it not that big of a deal to you because you think Dylan Carlson could fill in just fine? Or do you kind of expect the Cardinals to look for options outside of Dylan Carlson within their organization, moving Lars Nootbaar to center field in the process? What's kind of your expectation for what the Cardinal lineup will look like if Tommy Edman is on the shelf to begin the season? We could spend some time talking about Victor Scott and his ability to force the issue. I'm running up against the clock here, though, for this edition of B-Shape Daily. But keep it in mind, if Victor Scott plays well, he could force a decision upon the Cardinals, especially if Dylan is not really taking his opportunity and running with it here in spring. If the numbers aren't looking great for him within a couple of weeks and Victor Scott's looking good, the Cardinals could say, look, we don't know when Tommy Edman's going to be back. You know, that there's another setback to the wrist. Maybe we put Victor Scott on this team from the very beginning if it's a longer-term thing for Edman and see if he can provide a spark, because we know defensively he'll be able to hold it down. We know the speed is going to be very dangerous on the base paths. It's a matter of, can he get on base enough and hit enough to be able to justify his readiness for the big leagues? I still put it at a long shot, but the longer that Tommy Edman's situation remains murky, and if Victor Scott starts looking really good at the plate in spring, it is something that could be considered down the line. Let me know, too, in the comments if you think that's something the Cardinals should consider, and we might spend more time talking about it in a future video. That, though, is going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for watching and listening. Make sure to hit that subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen, as well as subscribe to B-Shape Daily on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Shape Daily. Peace.